ebony twilight metallic inside of the Buick Envista is a fairly sharp color choice, especially when you pair it with the ST trim level like what we're looking at behind me here. You're only going to find the Envista front-wheel drive, so there's no all-wheel drive option available inside this vehicle. But if you live somewhere where you're going to get a colder climate or you're going to see snow part of the year, front-wheel drive still is okay. You just want to make sure you get yourself a good pair of winter tires. And the wheels inside of this thing, you're either going to have 17, 18, or 19 inch, depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. I gotta say, I really like the ST wheels though, because they're blacked out, and I just love the style of blacked out wheels. The overall body styling inside of the Envista is fairly nice. You've got your Buick badge along the front, and then because this is the Sport Touring, the little ST badge right in the grille. There are LED headlamps inside of the Envista, and then just nice cutouts throughout the moldings of the front end and working into that bumper. And then there's also the option for an engine block heater right from the factory. So if you live in those colder climates, it is available. But I'm actually surprised at the Buick lineup and the way that this thing looks. I really do enjoy the overall styling of this vehicle. Underneath the hood of the Envista, there's only one engine choice that's available. And that's this 1.2 liter turbocharged engine. It is a small engine, but it's got 137 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. And that 162 pound-feet of torque leads to a vehicle that is actually surprisingly peppy and pretty fun to drive at the same time. Like, don't get me wrong, you're not going to take this thing to the track and win competitions. But if you're looking for a good vehicle to get you from A to B, that's cost-effective and also a little bit peppy if you need the speed, it is available there. You've got easy access if you want to top up your wiper fluid, change your oil, and there is also easy access to the battery. But you just want to make sure you're regularly maintaining your ride to get the best possible life out of your vehicle. Filling up fuel inside of the Envista is straightforward. It's just along the driver's side. It's an unlocked cover with a capless system that does feature anti-siphon technology. One nice thing about the Envista is that it just requires regular 87 gas, so regular octane is all you need to use inside of this thing. And I actually do really like this thing for the fuel economy that you get out of it. It's got a 1.2 liter engine, which is a fairly small engine, but when you look at it, I did a 100-kilometer road trip in this thing, and I was averaging about 6 liters per 100. So it's incredibly fuel efficient for the size and for the power that you get. The back end of the Envista is well put together. I like the style of the badges. The lamps look fantastic, especially when lit up at night. And then the overall body styling of the bumper is great. Now, you're not going to find a rear wiper inside of the Envista. Just because of how slanted the back end is there, water's just going to beat away, and then in the wintertime, just turn on that rear defroster, and the snow and ice are just going to pour off of it, which is great. There's different technology you're going to find inside the vehicle depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. So that rear beeping you get as you back up is available. There's also a cross-traffic alert system. So as you go to back up, if somebody's coming perpendicular, you're going to get a notification letting you know of a potential collision, which is useful. From a liftgate perspective, inside of the entry-level trim, it's going to be a manual liftgate as a default. But when you get into the higher trims of the vehicle, it's going to be power. There's a button just by the first row door that you can push in order to open up. You can use the key fob, and then just underneath the I and the C in Buick, if you trace underneath, there's also a button that you can push in order to raise the liftgate instead. So no foot activated liftgate, unfortunately, but you still do have this option available, which is still pretty nice. This one has the available cargo shield, so useful if you wanted to block off whatever you have in the trunk. Removing it is straightforward. So along the left versus the right side, and then actually popping this out, I find just a few good whacks will let you pull it out easily. There's not a ton of stuff inside of the cargo area of the Envista. There's nothing off to the right side. Off to the left, there's just a little light. And then this is just the regular carpeted liner, and lifting it up, you do have a mini spare tire. So if you ever pop a tire, puncture a tire, you do have the flexibility of changing it yourself because the jack is located just underneath that mini spare. But one of the nice things about being a Buick owner is that you also do have access to roadside assistance, and that's the same for the powertrain warranty, so the same length. And that's good for things like tire changing, fuel delivery, battery lockout services, and things like that. So there's an 800 number you call, and think of it like CAA or AAA down in the States, but it's tied to the vehicle and not to the driver. But it is useful at the same time. And then folding down the second row seats is equally as straightforward. So through the trunk area, you could fold down the driver or the passenger side, and it's a 60-40 bench. So it's 40 on the driver, 60% on the passenger side. And then if you need to fold down the cargo seats without actually getting into the trunk, just along the second row door there, just gonna open up after you unlock. And then the release is just along the very top. So same idea, you're gonna pull in order to drop that seat down. And the cargo measurements that we're looking at, they're going from right where the liftgate would close to just in behind the armrest between the first row seats. So if the driver's seat, passenger seat are forwards, backwards a few extra inches, you're gonna gain or lose a little bit of extra space, just depending on how far forwards or backwards those seats are. But still, for a vehicle this size, it still does have a great amount of cargo space in it. When you look at the size of the Envista, it does have a fairly small footprint. It's a small crossover with seating for 5 people. But where the Envista really shines is when you look at the value proposition. The size of the vehicle with the cargo space that it's got and the available power at the price point makes it a pretty solid offer for people that are looking for something that's a little bit nicer than the Chevy Trax, which is built off of the same platform. But in my opinion, I think the Envista is put together a little bit nicer in comparison. Taking a peek at the key fob for the Envista. So you've got the unlock button, trunk release, the lock button, remote start, corner panic alarm, and then there's also the release for the emergency access key along the very back. So if you ever need to get inside the vehicle because the fob's died, it's a little bit tricky to do, but not impossible. So if you look, see you've got your little keyhole there. So you actually have to get in behind here, push this cover off, which is gonna let you then insert the key in order to get inside if the fob's ever died. So not too tricky to do, not impossible at the same time. Now, if you wanted to be able to remote start the vehicle, it's straightforward. So you just make sure that the vehicle's locked first, and then you do a press and hold of that circle button in order to be able to remote start. And then you just do a press and hold of the button again in order to cancel the remote start. One nice thing about the Envista though, is that it's also got a walk away lock feature. So let's say you shut the door and walk away. It's automatically gonna lock for you, which is great. So that's even if you started the car up, if you just unlock the door accidentally, whatever the case may be, eventually the door will automatically lock, which I think is a great safety setting. The side view mirrors inside of this thing do feature turn signals. The side view mirrors are also featuring the blind spot monitoring system. So if somebody's entered the blind spot on either side, that's gonna highlight to let you know. With a fob on you, you can push this button in order to open up both doors, and then hopping inside. The ST badge, I love the seats inside of this, which I'll touch on in a second. But you've got this nice blue stitching that follows all the way throughout the dash, throughout the seats. And again, because this is the Sport Touring model, it looks slightly different in the other models. But you've got your basic side view mirror controls, window controls, and because this one has the power liftgate, you can also open it up and close it by pushing that button. You can also adjust it, so you can turn that liftgate off. You can have it only go 3/4 of the way open or all the way open instead. You've got your speaker there. And then, seats. So the seats inside of this thing are going to be power adjustable. So you can go backwards, forwards, up and down. You can adjust your backrest. And then there's also 2-way lumbar support on top of that. All right, and taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Buick Envista. In this walkthrough, you're going to learn everything you need to know about the steering wheel. The first thing I'm going to point out is that it's a manual telescoping wheel. So by your left knee, there's a release there. You can go in, out, up, and down to find that perfect position. Once you do, click it in order to lock it back into place. The buttons on the left-hand side are going to be for your adaptive cruise control system. So you can toggle the system on or off by pushing the button there. You can then either cancel or switch out to traditional cruise instead. So the adaptive cruise is the set it and forget it cruise. So let's say if you set it at 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, if the car in front of you slows down, yours is automatically going to brake. Versus switching it to the regular cruise control instead, if you set it at 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, car in front of you slows down, yours won't brake, so you've got to brake yourself. I personally am a bigger fan of the adaptive cruise control system though. Then you've also got the gap adjustment, and I want you to think of that like a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type of a rule. So how close or far away do you want to be from the vehicle that's in front of you? I personally recommend on the highway 2 to 3. On regular city streets, 1 is more than enough. But if you want to walk through and how that actually works in person, you'll find that down in the description of this video. There's also a button for a heated steering wheel, which is available inside of the Envista, and it's heated pretty much all the way around, which is fantastic. There's a voice command prompt there. So when you're hooked up to your phone through Android or iPhone devices, you can push there in order to activate your Google or your Siri Assistant instead. Then there's this button there, and that one is going to be to hang up on a phone call. You can answer a phone call, and then you can also adjust your media that way instead. And then there's also a little rocker there to go between some different screens that I'll show you in just a second. But another thing to point out, your stick on the left-hand side, so you can flash at your high beams that way if you want to. There's an auto lamp mode as well. But for the high beams, if you wanted to permanently lock those out, you have to be out of the auto mode. So there's a button just by your left knee. So you have to get yourself into one of the other modes instead, and then you can push away in order to be able to activate your high beams permanently instead. I personally am a bigger fan of the auto mode though, but that one's going to be a matter of personal preference. And then the stick on this side is going to be able to adjust what's going on with your wipers. So moving up and down this way, if you're in the auto mode, that's going to be how quick or how slowly do you want the wipers to be going versus high versus low automatically. You're going to pull in towards you to get that front windshield wiper fluid going as well. And then the Envista does not have a rear wiper whatsoever. Now, the cluster screen, zoom in a little bit there. There are quite a few different things you need to know. So first thing is that you'll notice I need to put in a little bit more windshield wiper fluid. But if you ever get a message there, you can just push the little scroll wheel in, and that acts as an OK button. So I've gotten rid of that warning message. Now, you can see there, I currently don't have my seatbelt plugged in, which is why that message is turned on. You can see what direction you're currently facing, whether or not your lane keeping system is active or not. So you can toggle that one on or off down the center stack. With it turned on, when it recognizes the lane markings, it's going to go green. And then if you start to veer over into another lane without signaling, it's going to gently nudge you back into your lane. It's not a full lane centering system, but at least it's nice that it's going to keep you nice and balanced as you go. From there, you've also got your current fuel gauge, how many kilometers or miles you are to empty, your current vehicle speed, what gear you're in, so whether that's park, reverse, neutral, drive, or if you're in your dedicated low gear, and what gear are you in when that's the case. You can see your current odometer, your engine temperature, and then also your lead vehicle. So how far away are you from the vehicle that's in front of you? So again, that is going to work regardless of whether you've got the adaptive cruise control system turned on. So you can see if you're half a second, 3 seconds, whatever the case may be, in front of the lead vehicle, which I think is useful. From there, you've also got the flexibility to be able to customize the screen a tiny little bit. So if you push and hold for a brief second, that's going to pull up the gauge faces. And there are a few different ones that are available. So you've got gauge face 1 that has a little tachometer as well as your digital speed. Pushing and holding again for a brief second will bring you into a few other options. You can go basic vehicle information instead. So if you wanted fuel economy, that would show up. Pushing and holding again is going to give you the option for infotainment or just like a clean, minimalistic look instead. So there are some different options that are available. Personally, I'm a fan of either gauge 1 or gauge 2. Gauge 2 is nice because you've also got your traditional tachometer as well as the digital speed. But there's no dual setup where you can have the tachometer and the speedometer. So it's just this setup if you wanted to be able to see them both. So that one's going to be a matter of personal preference, but I personally am a fan of this one. Before I get to more technology, let's talk first row seat comfort and space even. So with the seat as far down as it's going to go, I've got 4.5, 4-ish inches of headspace, which for a vehicle this size, I would say is pretty respectable at the same time. Nice. The seats inside of the vehicle are also fairly comfortable too, which is good. It's a leatherette, so a faux leather seat, but the build quality on it is nice. And like I said, with the ST model, with all of the blue stitching. I do think it looks pretty sharp. Blue's my favorite color. So just seeing that stitch throughout the seat and the door and through the dash, I just think it looks great. The visibility inside of this thing is pretty good all the way around. This is the 11-inch infotainment system that you're going to find inside of the Buick Envista. It doesn't have factory navigation, but one of the nice things is that you can hook up your phone through either Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in order to use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze. But I'll explain that process as we get to the screen there. So first thing I'm going to point out is that you've got this little button along the very top. You've got your volume rocker there, and then you can also do a quick press to mute the audio, or do a longer press and hold in order to turn the screen into this calming mode instead. You can then just push in order to bring the screen back to life instead. One nice thing, so yeah, you've got the volume rocker there. Now, looking at the media screen, so you've got a series of different buttons along the outside. So you've got your audio, phone, traction control, vehicle information, and then a basic home screen there as well. You've got a little notification icon, whether or not your vehicle's connected, looking at your outside temperature, and then the current time. And then this is going to be SiriusXM. So by pushing this button, you can jump between AM, FM, SiriusXM. If your phone was hooked up over Bluetooth, that would also show up there as an available option. And then if you had a USB stick with MP3s on there, you'd also be able to plug yourself in. And then in a few seconds there, we should also have our USB device. And then pushing through, you've got all of your available audio there. So again, it is kind of nice that you've got the option of going over USB for your audio. And as I mentioned, so AM, FM, Sirius XM. You can jump between different stations this way if you want to. You can push this little icon in order to move between all of your different stations. And you can see there, as you start to type, it gives you all of the available stations with that heading. And then if you wanted to, you could save any of these as a preset as well. So as one of your favorite stations. And then you can type through, hit go, in order to be able to launch into that individual station too. Then along the bottom, you can see all of your available presets. I think there's a boatload of them, and they're a mix of AM, FM, Sirius XM. If you wanted to save any as a preset here, once you've tuned to the station you want, you can then just do a press and hold in order for it to be able to overwrite your presets there. You can then push this way, so this little icon, to get to some different sound settings. So you'll be able to adjust your treble, your bass, your mid-range, and your treble. Usually what I recommend in the vehicle is your bass up by a few points and your treble up by a point or two. Tends to give some pretty good audio. And then you can push the little button along the top right side there if you wanted to reset everything back to center instead. There's also a fade and balance. So do you want it focused on just the driver, the people in the back seat, or recentered back out instead? Moving back from there, you can also manage your favorite stations. So you've got all of the presets that have been saved. There's actually quite a lot of them. So you could delete any of these if you wanted to, just by pressing the little icon there. And then you can also reorganize. So you can then just do a press and hold. And once it's loose, you can then move it up and down as necessary in order to create that perfect position and that perfect setup for you. And then just back out from there. You've got radio, text, and then categories, whether or not those ones show up. And then the only other one is going to be Sirius XM to show you some additional settings there. So you can jump between channels this way. You can push this if you know the station that you want to tune to, or you can do this little hamburger icon if you wanted to move between all of your categories. So if you wanted to listen to different music, sports, talk, and things like that, you can jump between all of the available options. So you jump between whichever one. Let's listen to some smooth jazz for a second there. So you're now on the jazz channel. So you've got a ton of different options that are available there, back into your basic settings that we looked at earlier. And then the only other thing, looking at USB, you could shuffle out, and then you can also look at all of your available songs, playlists, composers, and things like that when you're listening to the USB audio. So if you've got a backup of all of your audio, you'd be able to look through and play by composer, play by a song, artist, whatever the case may be. But that's the basics of using the media inside the vehicle. Next one to point out is going to be your phone. So as of right now, no phone's currently connected. But you can see there, the phone has something that's wirelessly charging. So you've got a little green icon there. When you pull your phone off of the wireless charger, that little green icon goes away. But in order to be able to add or manage phones, you just go Manage Phones. Then you're just going to hit the little plus icon there. On your phone, you're going to jump into your Bluetooth, and you're going to look for My Buick, and should be this there. Perfect. And you want to pair and pair because the pin numbers match up, and we're connected. From here, if you wanted to, you could jump in for first to connect. So if you have multiple phones connected, it's who gets connection priority. But one nice thing about the Buick is that you also do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So do you want to use CarPlay with My Buick? Yes, we're going to use. And terms of service, nothing exciting there. So you're just going to hit enable. And we're just waiting for the phone to connect. In 3, 2, 1, we are fully connected. So you can see there, nice full screen. With the exception, the icons here wouldn't be movable. So all along the outside there, that's locked into place. So you're just going to look at that screen there. Along the top, you can see your current time, connection level, and battery level, which map was open last, which audio application was open last, and then which miscellaneous application was open last. This icon is going to let you go between either this home screen or back out to this little view instead. And then you can swipe in between to get to those different options, the different little icons, which is kind of nice. From there, you've got either Apple Maps, Google Maps, or Waze. So you can move the map around this way, but there's no pinch to zoom. So you have to go in and out this way instead. You can search for addresses, look at previous destinations, and that's the same thing with Google Maps as well. So Google Maps, you can search for addresses. You can also have it adjust different things on your route. So did you want to avoid highways, toll roads, or ferries? Back out and back. You can search for addresses there, or move yourself around this way instead. And then Waze is the same idea. So there are a few different map applications that are available inside of this thing. So you can see there, a ton of different options that are available. You can search for addresses. You can also push your little microphone there if you wanted to dictate an address. You can push this if you wanted to mark off certain things along the route as you go. And then once you're connected to your phone, you can also push the little voice command prompt on the steering wheel in order to activate that assistant instead. It's useful. And then there are a series of different audio applications that are available. So there's podcasts that are available, Apple Music, Hoopla is a library app, you've got Live One, which is a radio app. So there's a lot of flexibility for this screen. Then one nice thing is that you've got the flexibility to customize it. So on your phone, you're going to go into your general settings, look into CarPlay, and then you're looking for My Buick. You can forget the car, you can toggle CarPlay off, or you can customize the screen. So let's say if you like listening to your podcast, you're just going to do a drag and drop. So you're just going to do a drag along the side and drop it to whatever location. You can also delete different icons by pushing the little minus button and then remove. And that fully removes them from the screen, but it saves them along the bottom. So you could add them back in if you want to. If you've played around with the icons too much and you've customized it too much, you don't like it, you can just hit reset on your phone in order to reset it back to the factory default layout screen there instead, which is very straightforward. Now from there, you can also push the little home icon if you wanted to get back out of the screen. You can jump back into CarPlay that way if you want to. Back home, and then you can also press there to launch back into CarPlay instead. And one thing to point out, if you go back home into your settings, you've got your phones that are available, and then you've got either the iPhone or the other phones. You can then hit options, and you can turn CarPlay off. So let's say if you didn't want to use CarPlay, you just wanted to use Bluetooth for phone call, your phone for Bluetooth and calls and things like that, you'd have the flexibility to be able to do that. And then you can hit first to connect. And if you've got multiple phones connected, that means it's going to try to connect to that phone first. So let's connect through, and it's connected now. So now you can make phone calls and you can listen to audio over Bluetooth, and you're not using CarPlay whatsoever. I know that's a lot of information, but that's how you set up iPhones inside of the Buick Envista. Setting up an Android device is the exact same process, and it's the same whether it's a Samsung, Google, whatever the case may be. So if you're not on this screen, let's say if you're on the home screen, you can hit phone there if there's no phone connected, or go into your settings, and then from there you've got, typically when you jump into settings, you're going to have this screen. You're going to connect to phones there, and then you're going to hit the little plus button. Do you want to switch phone? Yes, we're going to disconnect from the currently connected phone, and we're going to add in a new phone right now. You're going to be looking for My Buick, which is showing up, and the PIN numbers match up, so let's hit pair and OK. And you can see there, we are now connected. And you do also have wireless Android Auto on this thing too. So on the phone, it's now asking me, do I want to allow access to my contacts? This is not my car, so I'm going to say no. If it was yours, you'd obviously say yes there. You're going to enable in order to be able to actually use Android Auto. And it should take a few seconds there. Android Auto is available, and a few seconds in, we are fully connected to Android Auto now, which is great. So you can see they're fully connected. You've got your maps, you've got what's currently going on with your audio. Along the outside there, for Google Maps, you've got a little settings icon. So same idea of what we saw on the Apple side of things. You'd be able to edit route options to avoid toll roads, motorways, ferries, and things like that. You can easily search for addresses. You can go in and out this way, but you've also got pinch to zoom capabilities on the Android Auto side of things. If you wanted a full screen map, along the very bottom, so there's a few different icons there. You can do this little icon to get to your little icon view. Push there to get to your split screen. There's the microphone there to use your Google Assistant. You can push the voice command prompt in order to use your assistant that way. But if you hit the map icon there, you go full screen map, which is great. I like that. And then you can go with this button there to go to your little split screen. You can connect to your phone or look at additional settings there instead. Now, one thing, this phone does have Waze installed, but I mean, as you can see there, Waze is not showing up on the screen. So if that's the case for you, I have put together a little walkthrough video explaining how to add Waze to Android devices if you're using Android Auto. You can find that walkthrough video down in the description of this video. But I mean, that's the basics there. Like, that's Android Auto in a nutshell. You can exit to get back home, or you can just press the little home icon in order to get back to this little screen instead. You can hit settings to look at the phones if you want to. You can hit options, and then first to connect. If you've got multiple phones connected, you can disconnect it, or you can completely forget the phone instead. So forget, and that's fully removed that one vehicle from the phone from the vehicle. And it's that easy setting up Android and iPhone devices inside of the Buick Envista. Next up, let's look at our traction control settings. So there are 3 different modes that are available. So with your traction control off, there are benefits of turning these things off. So benefit is that it's going to help you out with your wheel slippage. So it's going to help you out with better performance, specifically in sandy conditions, mud conditions, but the big ones are snow and ice. So if you're driving and you're finding that your wheels are constantly spinning and they're not getting good traction, it's actually beneficial to turn the traction control off, or the traction and the stability control as well. So you've got the flexibility to adjust each of these things. You can have them all on, one on or off, whatever the case may be. So as I mentioned, the big thing there is wintertime driving with front wheel drive. That can be beneficial to turn off if you're not getting good traction. Next up is going to be this little icon, and that's going to give you options for either maintenance, gauges, or your trip. And then there's tire pressure, oil life, and a few other things here as well. But the benefit of these different buttons is that as you go through, so let's say if we go to tire pressure right now, and then tire pressure we've connected to, but you can also relearn, or you can show it in the cluster. But let's see, one of the big ones here, cross engine air filter is nice, battery voltage, coolant temperature, and you've also got your trip counter. So your trip 1 versus your trip 2 information there. So let's say if you wanted to reset your trip info, you could do that, but you can also show it inside of the cluster screen. So if you hit show in cluster, it shows that information that you've selected right in the cluster screen for trip information, fuel economy, or any of the other gauge information. So if you prefer to have that information showing in the cluster, you've got the flexibility to be able to easily do it. And then you can also reset any of these values. So you can see there, you can either reset the best score, remove the information from the cluster screen instead to default it back to your regular cluster view, or you can click back out. You can do the same for all of your gauges. So if you'd prefer to see your coolant temperature inside of the cluster screen, you can do that, or you can remove it from the cluster to go back to the default look instead. So it's kind of nice that you've got the flexibility to do that. And you've got basic maintenance information for your engine filter. So if you're changing filters out yourself, if you're changing your oil and things like that, you've got the flexibility to adjust these things as you go and reset them yourself if you're doing the work yourself. There's the little home icon along the very bottom. You can hot button press to get into Android Auto or Apple CarPlay if you were still connected. There's some basic climate information. So climate is currently off. So if we turn it back on, you can see some basic climate information. Do you want it going to your windshield, face, or feet? Some sort of Frankenstein combination of all of the above. So you do have some more buttons down the center stack, but you've also got the flexibility of adjusting some things through your screen. So you can adjust the fan speed, go auto mode, air conditioning, air circulation, or toggle the system off there instead. You can go back to this screen to get to some additional settings. And the settings there, We've got system, vehicle, and app information. So if you wanted to adjust the date and time yourself, you could. If you prefer that military time instead, so that 24-hour mode, you could adjust it out. Automatic date and time means that the vehicle is going to determine what it is based off of your GPS location. If you want to set it yourself, you just toggle it off, and then you can adjust it out however you'd like to from there. I just usually recommend letting the vehicle determine what it is, though. And moving back, you can also adjust your language, so either English, French, or Spanish. And the languages that you get are going to be based off of your geographic region when you purchase the vehicle. I'm in Canada, that's why we have the North American 3-language standard there. Basic information for phone, which we've already seen. Wi-Fi network, so if you wanted to connect to a Wi-Fi network at home, it's beneficial for downloading updates. Wi-Fi hotspot gives you the flexibility to use your vehicle as a wireless hotspot, so you can connect a number of different devices to the vehicle, which it can be kind of useful. But you do need a data connection, or your OnStar connection, I should say, in order to be able to actually use this as a hotspot. There's basic privacy information. You can share some information to your phone. And then the other one is going to be display. So you can toggle it off there if you want just a completely naked display. But I personally am a bigger fan of just doing a press and hold there instead in order to get the date and time. So if you wanted just a blank display, you could do that. I just, like I said, recommend pressing that way instead. Then there is sound that's available. So as of right now, there's no beep. But if we turn this on, so you can hear there, you actually get a little bit of feedback as you do a button press. If that drives you nuts, you do have the flexibility to be able to turn it off. I'm typically a fan of having that one turned off, but that one's a matter of preference. You've also got your unit measurements. And when you adjust your unit measurements, you're either going to be in the US, so either empirical versus metric. And that's going to change up the cluster screen as well, because it's automatically going to adjust if you're in miles, if you're in kilometers, whatever the case may be, which is pretty useful if you're going down to the States. But I'm in Canada, let's change that back to metric, and you're set to go from there. You've also got updates, so if there are vehicle updates that are available, you can check to see, or there's also preferences where you can download the updates in the background as the vehicle goes. Basic about information, which there's nothing overly exciting there, just your software version, and then 2 different reset options. You could reset your basic vehicle settings or erase all the infotainment data. So if you're selling your Buick, you would go there to erase everything and bring it back to your factory default instead. So if it's ever giving you any issues, you can always start there. Vehicle information is available there as well. So you've got Team Driver, lets you set limitations for a key fob, where you can't go past a certain speed, you can't have your volume past a certain point, and things like that. Rear seat reminder, if you open up the second row doors and then get in and drive, when you turn the vehicle off, it's going to remind you to check the back seat to make sure you didn't forget anybody back there. Some basics for your defog, defrost, or your fan speed when you're in the auto mode. So the auto mode, there are 3 different settings that are available for the blower fan speed. I just always recommend just keep it at medium as a default. A bunch of safety settings as well. So the vehicle has emergency braking available. So if there's a potential collision, it's going to try to avoid the collision by braking or minimize the impact. So you can have it where it brakes for you. It just gives you an alert, or it does nothing. General safety, I think it's a good idea to have the alert and the braking available there as well. Front pedestrian braking. If the vehicle recognizes that there's a pedestrian in front of the vehicle, it can brake for you automatically. It can give you an alert or do nothing. Same idea, just for general safety, I think the alert and the brake is a good idea. And then cross-traffic alert. So when you're in reverse, if there's a vehicle coming perpendicular, so from the left or the right side, it's going to let you know of a potential collision there instead. Comfort and convenience, the big one there is going to be rain sensing wipers, so they can automatically turn on if rain hits the windshield. Basic info for lighting. So the exit light is an interesting one. So when you go to lock the vehicle, do the lamps just turn off, or do they stay on for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or 120 seconds? And then vehicle locator lights. Useful because if you're pressing the lock button to try to locate your vehicle, it's going to flash at you to let you know where your vehicle is. Power door locks. This one is the important one. So when you go to unlock the vehicle, do all doors become unlocked? From a safety perspective, is it just the driver's door that becomes unlocked? Or nothing happened when you press the unlock button there instead? And then remote lock, unlock, and start, same idea. Do you want to get feedback when you go to use the fob in order to remote unlock? Is it all doors, just the driver's door? passive door unlock. As long as you've got the fob on you, you can push the button on the driver's door in order to be able to get inside. And then if you've left your key inside of the vehicle, do you want a little reminder to let you know? Then basics for apps, so you've got audio, phone, and OnStar. We've already seen audio settings. Phone settings gives you a few things, so active call versus how do you want your contacts sorted. So if you've said yes and let your vehicle download your contact information, is it going to go first name, last name, or last name, first name first? And then the only other one is going to be your OnStar service. There's only one other thing to point out here, and that's that these buttons along the outside of the screen, you've got the flexibility to customize them a little bit. So you can see there you've got a basic layout, but you can also do a press and hold. And then once it's loose, you can actually drag it up and down in order to create a customizable position for each of these things instead. So if you want your audio down low, traction control up high, you can just do a press and hold there in order to be able to adjust it out from there. So the home icon's always stuck in place, but you could adjust these four instead if you really wanted to. But you've got single zone climate control inside the vehicle, your climate control going to your windshield face feet, your heated first row seats there as well. Moving down, there are also some power points. So data ports too. So you've got a USB Type-C, USB Type-A port. So that's where you'd go if you wanted to plug your phone in to charge up. You can also use wired Android Auto and Apple CarPlay instead if you'd like. There's a 12-volt power point back there. And then the shifter inside this thing is great as well. Park, reverse, neutral, drive, dedicated low gear, where you can utilize the plus minus button there in order to be able to switch gears out manually yourself instead if you'd like to. There's also a little start-stop button there. So that's the one that's going to kill power to the engine if you come down to a complete stop for a certain amount of time. So it doesn't stop all the time, but it starts sometimes. And one thing to note about that button is that when you turn your engine off and you turn the vehicle back on again, that's going to turn back on. So if you don't like the start-stop feature, you have to press that button every time. There's also a little lane keeping system there as well. So it's a little lane keeping where if you start to veer over into another lane without signaling, it's going to gently nudge you back into your lane. So it's not full self-driving and it's not a full lane centering system. It's just a basic lane safety, so a lane keeping system. The rear view camera inside the vehicle, I'd say is pretty good. Ooh, a little cross traffic alert there. So it lets me know that there's somebody that's coming perpendicular from the vehicle, so from the left or the right side, which is very useful. You've got some cup holders, an electronic parking brake, and then the armrest, which has a surprising amount of space in it. I like that dash highlight there, nice glossy highlight. And then there's a glove box that's non-lockable. Up overhead, this thing has a manual dimming rearview mirror. It's a General Motors vehicle, so you've got your OnStar and your SOS mode, cabin lights, and then there are also two little switches for the sunroof. So sunroof is there. You can manually slide this open if you want to. There's a little vent mode, so you can vent yourself out that way, and then close. And then one nice thing is that if this is closed, you can also just press this button in order to open up the roof. So single button press opens it up most way. Secondary button press opens it up that last little bit. And when it's fully opened, it's actually fully hidden as well too, which is great. And then just single button press in order to close. So I mean, it's not a full panoramic roof, but still, it's nice that it's there at the same time. From there, you've got a little ticket receipt holder on the outside. The vanity mirror has lights built in. And then this thing is locked into place, so it doesn't extend out. So you might get a little bit of sun glare on your side there, but that's where tinting your windows out would come into play. Audio inside of this thing is also pretty good. So I did mention there's a series of options. You've got AM, FM, SiriusXM, Bluetooth, USB is available there as well. So just plug in. Oh, I guess I could have just left that in to the available data port there. But yeah, series of different sources. If your phone was hooked up over Bluetooth, you could make phone calls there as well. And there's so many different options there. Ooh. Let's find a song here. All right, let's go through and actually let's maybe listen to some classical music for a second. So I wonder if USB, I'm pretty sure I've got some things on there. Beethoven, maybe some Fur Elise. There we go. All right, so the audio that we're about to listen to is coming right out of the microphone, so there's no post-processing done whatsoever. That's nice and calming, nice and relaxing. The audio inside of this is actually fairly good. I do like it. And like I said, speakers all over the place. So you've got speaker along the dash there, and there's speakers along the door, and then in the second row. So you do have a pretty good audio experience inside this vehicle. But the overall style of the Envista is very nice. This vehicle is built off of the same platform as the Chevrolet Trax, but the two vehicles couldn't be more different from one another. There are like some similarities, like you've got similar powertrains, but the interior of the Envista, in my opinion, is nicer in comparison. Like even the basic highlights, like the dash, the feel of it, the material is great. I like how the screens here, so the dual screens for the cluster and for the infotainment are fully connected in the middle. It's just overall a nicer vehicle in my opinion, but spacing wise, like I said, is pretty good inside of this thing. And then with the driver's seat set up for myself, the way that I would traditionally drive, yeah, there we go. So with the driver's seat set up this way, inside of the second row, I've got a good amount of knee space, great amount of foot space, and up overhead though, it's a little bit tight. Because the Envista's slanted a little bit more, yeah, my head is touching the very back if I sit upright. If I kind of slouch a little bit, or if I move forward a little bit, then my head is like just kind of touching, like more the hair's touching than anything, but it's a little bit tight back here. So fitting adults that are taller than 6 feet in the second row, it is going to be a little bit tight inside this vehicle. The other thing is going to be overall space, because if you've got people that are, wide-shouldered like I am, it's going to be tight. But if you've got kids, there's more than enough space there. It's a flat floor as well, which is great, but it just makes for a little bit more space as necessary rather than having to spread out. But the seats back here are comfortable, and there's not a ton to the seats themselves. Like the seats are just basic. If you've got kid seats though, the anchor points are there, and the top tether points are also there as well. So you could use the top tether points on all 3 seats as necessary. There's a pocket behind the passenger side, but you won't find one behind the driver. And there's also a USB Type-C and then a USB Type-A power point in the back, and a teeny little storage cubby there as well, along with a light. And then there's both a handle and a clothing hook along the driver's side. But outside of that, you've got a little bit of door storage with a speaker, and that's really it inside this vehicle. Like I said, it is a little bit tight for people that are 6 feet tall or taller inside of the second row, but said like young, if you've got kids, if you've got shorter friends, family, whatever the case may be, they'll be fine back here. But this thing is powered by the 1.2 liter turbocharged engine. So let's take it out for a spin and see how it handles. Don't get me wrong, this thing for the size is actually fairly peppy. But where the Envista really shines is in the incredible fuel economy that you're going to get. I ended up taking this thing out for a 100-kilometer test drive, and it was averaging 6 liters per 100. And I was kind of giving it a little bit. So it's a surprisingly fuel-efficient engine at the same time. I mean, 1.2 liters, it kind of makes sense. But let's do a little 0 to 50 test here. And 1, 2, 3, and... Okay. Hey, that's respectable. For a tiny little engine, that's not too shabby. And even from a general handling perspective as well, it's actually pretty solid at the same time. Let's wait for this car to go by and we'll do like a little slalom test. I mean, that's not bad at all. All right, they're going to do a little 0 to 60 here as well. All right, make sure auto start stop is turned off, and 0 to 60 in 2, 1, and 60. Hey, 5 seconds to 60, and a tiny little engine that's actually pretty respectable at the same time. I mean, it's not going to win you any drag strip competitions, but I mean, if you're looking for something that's got a little bit of pep if you need it, this thing should probably be on your radar. Yeah, like I said, like even the dynamics, like that slalom test that I just did. I mean, for a front-wheel drive car, I would say that is fairly respectable at the same time. It's good. And just overall seat comfort, like I gotta say, it is absolutely there inside of this vehicle. So these are leatherette seats, so it's a synthetic leather seat. Comfortable, heated first row seats are going to be standard inside of this thing. Along with a heated steering wheel, there's adaptive cruise control inside of this thing and a boatload of other useful features. 1.2 liter power! Not bad, not bad. And it's a fairly quiet ride. So the Buick Envista, it's built off of the same platform as the Chevy Trax, and I had the Chevy Trax last week, so it's kind of nice being able to do these things back to back. But one thing that I definitely noticed is that the Buick equivalent, so the Buick Envista that I'm in right now, way quieter in comparison to the Trax. It's a nice ride. I will give it that. It's nice, it's quiet, it's comfortable. And that was a look at the 2024 Buick Envista. You can find a build link down in the description of this video, but if you found this one useful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and until I see you next time, take care.